a mother vanishes into thin air. As the nationwide hunt for Nancy Guthrie intensifies, an entire country and our broadcasting family have wrapped a fierce protective embrace around Savannah, sending endless waves of strength and survival. This past Thursday marked a monumental step as Savannah bravely stepped back into Studio 1A, completely enveloped by her team's unwavering strength for the very first time since Nancy's chilling disappearance. The morning air was incredibly heavy with raw, tearful emotion as she wrapped her arms tightly around her morning show family. She expressed profound, heartbreaking gratitude, deeply touched that her colleagues cherished her mother with the exact same fierce devotion that she did. A breathtaking display of pure grit radiated from Savannah as she addressed everyone, declaring, "I need you all to see that I have not broken. My hope remains alive, and my spirit is intact. Whoever I become after this nightmare is still unwritten, but I will survive this." She stood incredibly resilient, fiercely determined to reclaim her spot on the morning broadcast, insisting, "Walking away completely simply isn't an option. Stepping back into this studio feels unimaginably daunting. Yet staying away feels utterly impossible. You all are my sanctuary, and I have to give this my absolute best." The segment culminated in a deeply powerful, chilling moment as Dylan guided the crew through a tearful, unified plea for Nancy's safe return, holding the emotional line together. But while tears fell in the studio, a catastrophic unraveling happened off-screen. 5 distinct bombshells were carelessly tossed to the public from a police microphone over the span of 41 agonizing days. A tracking pacemaker, critical survival pills, sensitive genetic material, tactical sweep locations, a mysteriously abandoned knapsack. Every single one of those explosive details slipped past the press podium and landed directly into the absolute worst possible hands. While this catastrophic leak of intel unfolded, a shocking scandal erupted. The very commander standing at that microphone had allegedly fabricated his professional history for 44 years, sparking an open, bitter rebellion from his own frustrated deputies. We are not here to debate mere moral failures or generalized guilt. This breakdown zeroes in on one incredibly specific, chilling inquiry. We must ask if these deeply compromising public statements, already cemented into the official record by his own mouth, cross a very distinct, severe legal boundary. Because the state of Arizona holds a ruthless protocol for officials who cross that line. The true nightmare began when 84-year-old Nancy Guthrie vanished from her Tucson residence in the pitch black, early hours of February 1st, 2026. She was not grabbed off a dark street corner, nor was she spirited away from a moving vehicle. She wasn't targeted in a bustling shopping plaza where a lurking shadow might easily blend into a crowd unseen. Someone deliberately breached the absolute sanctuary of her home, creeping into her bedroom in the dead of night to steal her away. Day 1 passed with zero sign of her. Day 7 brought nothing. Day 14 passed in silence. Then day 30. As of this recording, she has been missing for 41 excruciating days. Deep inside her chest sat a pacemaker, a rhythmic beacon designed to keep her heart beating, constantly throwing off an electronic pulse. Furthermore, she relied entirely on daily, life-sustaining prescriptions. This wasn't a casual daily vitamin. Missing a single dose wouldn't just cause a mild headache. It would instantly ignite a rapid, fatal medical collapse. An 84-year-old vulnerable woman was stolen under the cover of darkness. And yet, the suspect column remains terrifyingly, completely blank. The immense burden of bringing her home rested squarely on the shoulders of the Pima County Sheriff's Department. At the absolute center of this storm was Sheriff Chris Nanos, who instantly positioned himself as the definitive, ultimate authority of the search. He commanded the spotlight. He fielded relentless inquiries. He dropped breaking updates. He orchestrated massive media briefings. And this was no occasional update. These televised daily briefings quickly became the absolute focal point of a chilling mystery that had an entire nation holding its collective breath. Every single lens in southern Arizona zoomed in on that one stage, while every reporter chasing the story packed tightly into that press room. But lurking silently in the shadows of that very same broadcast was the exact monster who took her. That terrifying reality forms the absolute backbone of this breakdown. These pressers were no longer mere community updates or standard issue damage control strategies. They morphed into a direct, unfiltered feed, practically handed on a silver platter to the very individual orchestrating this dark puzzle. In a standard missing person scenario, where someone simply wanders off and there is no malicious predator hiding in the wings, broadcasting case details is a completely harmless, routine strategy. You turn to the community because the eyes and ears of your neighbors are your absolute greatest asset. You desperately need bystanders. You crave anonymous tips. You rely heavily on the off chance someone spotted something unusual. Handing out facts like candy makes perfect sense when you aren't playing a high-stakes game of chess against a shadowy antagonist. But a targeted abduction is a completely different, terrifying beast. When someone is stolen, there is a hyper-aware opponent. There is a cunning adversary actively pulling the strings, desperate to stay completely invisible, who religiously monitors the news cycle and desperately craves to know exactly how close the search hounds are getting to their front door. Under those grim circumstances, deciding which secrets to spill is absolutely never about managing public relations or appeasing the press. It is a lethal, high-wire tactical maneuver. Guarding secrets in an active abduction has zero to do with looking good for the cameras. It is not about spinning a slick narrative, controlling media leaks, or pretending to be the smartest guy in the room while the cameras roll. It is the razor-thin, agonizing line between bringing a captive home breathing or losing them to the void forever. Every single drop of classified intel that drips from a commander's lips into the evening news goes straight into the twisted playbook of the fugitive. They listen, they pivot, they adapt. That is the chilling, inescapable reality of hunting a calculating target who is actively watching you hunt them. Consequently, every single time the Pima County Sheriff confidently stepped up to those microphones, he was unknowingly feeding two entirely distinct crowds. One was the desperate family, the eager reporters, and the heartbroken public, the everyday folks he actually wanted to reassure. The other was the unseen phantom holding Nancy Guthrie captive, a viewer he might have completely ignored, but who was undoubtedly hanging on his every single syllable. Let's set the stage. Grasping this overarching nightmare is absolutely critical before we dive into the specific leaks, because without this terrifying context, you might just brush them off as isolated mistakes. If you look at them one by one, they just resemble clumsy PR blunders from a reckless spokesperson. But string them together, keeping in mind the sinister eyes glued to that broadcast, and a deeply disturbing reality emerges. The real issue isn't merely that secrets slipped out. The true terror lies in whether those spilled secrets handed a massive tactical advantage directly to the monster watching from the shadows, and whether anyone behind that podium paused to think before handing over the playbook. When someone is snatched against their will, you do not play games with details like that. Those exact details are the razor-thin line between a safe rescue and a devastating tragedy. In the span between day 1 and day 41, authorities handed over the answers 5 distinct times on the public record. 5 separate occasions where classified intel flowed from the microphone straight to the exact predator they were hunting. The very first fatal slip, it went down on day 1. During the February 2nd media briefing, barely 24 hours after Nancy Guthrie vanished into thin air, Sheriff Nanos stepped up and broadcasted to the world that Nancy relied on a pacemaker. He did not vaguely allude to her health. He pinpointed the exact hardware, a universally recognized piece of tech sitting right inside her chest, built to keep her pulse steady by broadcasting a relentless, unceasing pulse of its own. He gave away the equipment. He announced it was inside her, and he handed over that golden ticket before the first 24 hours had even ticked by. Stop and imagine the chilling realization hitting the captor watching that live feed right then. This isn't some highly classified experimental procedure. These gadgets are everywhere, talked about constantly, plastered across healthcare ads, and featured in endless medical specials. Any average Joe on the street grasps the concept of this chest implant. They understand it is electronic. They realize it needs a battery. They are fully aware it communicates through invisible waves. And with just a handful of minutes scrolling online, typing a few words into a smartphone browser, Literally anyone tuned into that briefing could instantly decode the catastrophic magnitude of the sheriff's revelation. The captive woman was walking around with a built-in beacon pulsing a ceaseless homing frequency that search teams could track. The man at the podium never spelled that part out, but he absolutely did not have to. The terrifying truth was already baked right into the announcement. From the second those words echoed out, Nancy Guthrie's captor knew her body was rigged with a digital breadcrumb trail. Realizing she carried an internal tracker, the cops could hunt down. Figuring out your next move as a kidnapper armed with that knowledge doesn't require criminal genius. You don't need a degree in cybernetics, an inside mole at the precinct, or any elite hacker skills whatsoever. You just need 12 minutes, maybe even fewer, to figure it out. And incredibly, that was merely phase 1 of the initial leak. Fast forward 14 days, not 48 hours, but a full 2 weeks later and the second devastating shoe dropped. Sometime in mid-February, insiders directly confirmed to CBS News that authorities strapped specialized gear onto low-hovering choppers, specifically sweeping the skies for the exact Bluetooth waves pulsing from Nancy Guthrie's chest. This wasn't some wild rumor or media guesswork. It was an absolute, on-the-record fact. The entire playbook, the aerial sweeps, the Bluetooth reliance. The frequency targeting was blasted out in high definition by journalists spoon-fed directly by the investigative team. Just picture the terrifying arsenal of knowledge handed over to her abductor by the time day 14 rolled around and that broadcast hit the airwaves. Day 1 gave them the weapon, a trackable bug inside their hostage. Day 14 literally handed them the blueprint on exactly how it was being tracked. They learned the heat was coming from the sky via helicopters. They learned the sweep relied entirely on catching the unique Bluetooth signature radiating from her implant. The captors grasped the mechanics perfectly, understanding exactly how the net was closing in, which means they knew precisely how to shatter that net, transport her outside the sweep zone, block the outgoing frequency, or neutralize the transmission entirely. We are not talking about top-secret spy tactics here. These are painfully obvious workarounds for any desperate criminal paying attention to the broadcast and motivated to stay out of a prison cell. I am not sitting here claiming the abductor definitely used this intel to shift their strategy. There is no concrete proof proving they pivoted. What I am exposing is the sheer volume of tactical ammunition the authorities practically gift-wrapped for them. The fact that the predator held these cards is not up for debate. It is a hard, undeniable reality, born directly from a microphone slip and leaks spoon-fed to reporters by the very people supposed to be protecting her. How the captor utilized that intel is another mystery entirely, but their possession of it, that is an absolute certainty, and all of that was just the opening disaster. The second massive breach unfolded on that exact same terrifying opening day, February 2nd, day 1. The cameras had barely started rolling when Nanos stared down the lens and declared, "If she is still breathing out there, she absolutely needs her pills." He emphasized the extreme urgency, practically begging the cameras to understand that more than 24 agonizing hours had already slipped away. And he boldly stated that relatives warned him a lack of those prescriptions would lead to an irreversible, tragic end. His exact narrative, from his own stage. On the very first day, while the initial blunder handed the abductor a digital tracking puzzle to outsmart, this new leak armed them with a psychological weapon of a completely different, horrifying nature. They literally handed a ticking timer straight to the person who took her. Pause and let the sheer terror of that reality sink in for a moment. If you are the one keeping her hidden, a fading battery is far more than a simple health update. It is the absolute foundation of your power in this sick game of chess. That fading ticker reveals the exact number of hours remaining before the entire scenario ends, dictating exactly when your ultimate bargaining chip loses all its value. It hands you the ultimate playbook for timing your every single move. It acts as a perfect gauge for how desperate the authorities are getting, while laying out your exact margin for error with terrifying accuracy. Within the first 24 hours, the Phantom in the Shadows was gifted a biological deadline broadcasted to the entire world, fine-tuned on national television, and permanently linked to the identity of their captive. We cannot say for sure if the person in control realized the immense power they were just handed, But the undeniable fact remains that the lead investigator hand-delivered this advantage to them on a silver platter. That is failure number 2. Once the third catastrophic leak occurred, any lingering doubts about a pattern of incompetence vanished entirely. Weeks into the agonizing search for Nancy Guthrie, detectives located hand coverings discarded on a shoulder roughly 2 miles from her residence, successfully pulling genetic material from the fabric. That vital biological evidence was immediately run through the combined genetic registry, the massive federal archive, heavily guarded by top agencies that houses the profiles of virtually every documented rulebreaker and detained individual nationwide. We are talking about millions of records, spanning decades of criminal history, the absolute gold standard for unmasking a faceless threat through microscopic traces. Yet, the local authorities rushed to social media with a shocking update. They broadcasted that the genetic trace belonged neither to her relatives nor to anyone in the massive federal system. Stop and really process the sheer magnitude of those two combined revelations. Eliminating the household meant detectives instantly lost the ability to narrow their sights on a close acquaintance or someone with easy access to her inner world. That entire investigative pathway was loudly and permanently slammed shut for everyone to see. But coming up empty in the National Registry carries a far more terrifying implication. The phantom they were hunting possessed an absolutely spotless history with federal law enforcement. They had 0 prior convictions and had miraculously avoided any run-ins with the law that would require a mandatory biological swab. In the eyes of the microscopic science, this predator did not even exist. The absolute largest forensic network in the country scanned their signature and came up totally blank. A terrifying fact, the lead agency freely shared on their public feeds, if the monster who snatched her was the same one who dropped that evidence. The authorities had just handed them a priceless gift of awareness. The perpetrator now knew their slate was completely wiped clean, untethered to the household. Invisible to the national radar, this meant the unseen figure could comfortably keep moving through the shadows, drop similar clues, revisit crucial spots, and blend right into the background without a trace. The task force had quite literally assured the culprit that their biological footprint was useless to the feds. It is absolutely crucial to clarify the exact nature of this particular trace material. Sourced from a grassy shoulder roughly 2 miles away, the team carefully avoided stating whether this sample specifically belonged to the disguised intruder. Officials were also quick to mention that secondary biological swabs gathered from within the actual living room were still pending laboratory review. While those details matter, they do not erase the horrifying reality. The confirmation of a massive dead end regarding the roadside evidence was loudly broadcasted, pushed straight to the timeline, and openly discussed by the very agency supposed to be playing their cards close to their chest. Moving to failure number 4, we find a catastrophic leak that perfectly complements the previously mentioned aerial tracking blunder. Around the middle of February, right as the tragic news about the medical device monitoring hit the airwaves, insiders within the department openly revealed the entire tactical blueprint they were using to hunt this person down. They detailed their frequency scanners, their localized web traffic surveillance, and the precise grid formations they were deploying. These highly sensitive tactics, which were definitely not just made up by eager reporters but directly leaked by internal operatives, soon dominated the headlines on major networks. By then, the ruthless captor knew far more than just the fact that they were being hunted. They knew the exact parameters of the trap. The Phantom was practically handed a manual on what electronic breadcrumbs to avoid, teaching them precisely how to craft a perfect void of data that would completely blind the task force. They became intimately aware of the absolute limitations of the scanners sweeping the sky. They were handed a literal map showing exactly where they could breathe easy and where they needed to vanish. A mere 14 days into the nightmare, the elusive shadow keeping Nancy had been gifted a masterclass on every single piece of technology aimed at their downfall, and this unparalleled advantage did not require a sophisticated cyber attack or the theft of top-secret files. It was simply handed to them on the evening news, courtesy of chatty officials. Fast forward to the 5th massive blunder, dropping around the 2nd of March, roughly 4 weeks into this endless ordeal. By the time this crucial juncture rolled around, authorities decided it was a brilliant idea to broadcast a hyper-specific clue, a dark, 25-liter outdoor excursion bag. Everyone now knew the exact manufacturer. The exact style was painted vividly for the public eye, turning a piece of critical, tangible proof into front-page gossip. A specific, highly publicized artifact sat at the very center of this dark puzzle. Yet, out of nowhere, the lead official went on national television and completely shifted the narrative about where this crucial bag originated. At first, detectives were absolutely certain the item had been bought brand new, straight off a department store shelf. That specific type of transaction guarantees a massive trail of receipts, credit card swipes, and glaring security camera captures. An undeniable, digital footprint permanently locked into a corporate server. Suddenly, they pivoted their entire hunt toward the shadowy corners of online auctions and underground resales, digital flea markets, where tracking down a buyer becomes an absolute nightmare. Imagine the sheer panic running through the actual perpetrator hearing this broadcast. If they had indeed scored that bag from an online auction house, or snatched it up through a quiet, under-the-table internet deal, any lingering digital crumbs leading back to them were suddenly on a ticking clock. The authorities had just broadcasted their exact target to the entire world. They practically gave the perpetrator a treasure map of their own detective work. Whoever needed to scrub their digital footprints now possessed the ultimate advantage, knowing exactly where the hounds were sniffing and precisely how long they had to cover their tracks. Law enforcement essentially handed their entire playbook directly to the prey. They broadcasted their upcoming raid locations long before their boots ever hit the ground. The hunted individual got a step-by-step tour of the detectives' past moves, their current roadblocks, and their future strategies. On 5 separate occasions, the task force actively telegraphed its punches to a phantom, which forces us to look right at the man running the show and dig into his professional past. Scrutinize the heroic tales he spun about his own legacy, and then compare that polished fairy tale against the cold, hard reality buried in the archives. Long before this current mess even started, a meticulously crafted CV existed, and that document is hiding a massive, glaring lie. The head honcho of this southwestern county has occupied the top law enforcement seat on 2 separate occasions. He initially slid into power during August of 2015 following a sudden retirement, suffered a crushing defeat the following year, and staged a comeback to claim the throne in January 2021. By November 2024, he secured another term. Throughout those years, he carefully sculpted a flawless public image based on unyielding dedication and a stellar badge-wearing history. Make no mistake, the man truly wore the uniform. He devoted countless decades to patrolling the streets. We are not dealing with a total imposter who magically bluffed his way into a command rank with 0 practical experience. Rather, this is a chilling look at an official whose actual history sharply contradicts his own mythology and the shocking paper trail of how he reacted when confronted with the truth. Way before he claimed his southwestern kingdom, the official spent time wearing a badge in a major Texas border city, at least according to his formal employment summary. The exact paperwork designed to validate his lifelong authority and competence, that widely circulated, legally filed profile used to legitimize his current reign states he walked away from that Texas precinct in 1984. Investigative journalists started digging into that specific timeline, unearthing a reality that completely shattered his written narrative. He never actually made it to 1984 in that department. An official internal oversight file from the border town, backed by aggressive newspaper reporting and a hastily amended CV released by his own agency on March 10, 2026, exposes a much earlier exit in 1982. And he certainly did not pack up his desk willingly. He was given the ultimatum to step down or be permanently exiled, a classic bureaucratic loophole utilized to quietly purge problematic badge holders. This maneuver let him masquerade his forced ousting as a graceful exit instead of a disgraceful booting, 2 entire calendar years. He artificially inflated his service record by 24 months that never existed. A glaring 24-month fabrication floating on a supposedly verified government document for 44 consecutive years. The exact reasons for his forced departure are permanently inked into the hidden oversight ledgers of his former precinct, defying direct orders and chronically failing to do his job. Those are the exact, damning words stamped onto his exit paperwork. Yet, Diving deeper into the 5-year shadow file, leading up to that final boot reveals a far more sinister pattern. 26 distinct accusations packed into a half-decade span, claims ranging from crossing physical lines with suspects, illicit underground betting, showing up late, completely abandoning his post, blatant neglect of his sworn oath, and intimidating others. A snowballing avalanche of misconduct that finally crushed his career in 1982. One particularly dark chapter hidden in those files centers around a man taken into custody under extremely questionable circumstances. The official was accused of brutally putting his boot to the detained man, sending the victim straight to a critical care hospital bed and triggering a high-level tribunal to review the carnage. The civilian panel ultimately passed on pursuing formal charges, leaving the department to hand down a mere 15-day unpaid timeout. By the time he was finally ousted, those scattered disciplinary actions had piled up to 37 total days of forced, unpaid banishment. The real exit was 1982, yet his polished paperwork proudly displayed 1984. Then there is the second glaring timeline issue. His official record claimed he earned his captain's bars in 2009. The hastily patched-up version pushed out by his PR team on March 10th admits he actually ranked up in 2007. Another massive chronological red flag on the exact same page. This is precisely where the narrative turns chilling. A single misplaced year on a job application can be brushed off as a simple typo. It is terrifying how easily the truth vanishes into the fog of time. People twist the years, butcher timelines, and casually erase the dark facts of a decades-long career. That deadly slip of memory is especially convenient when a dusty old file is slapped together years too late. Completely dodging the glaring spotlight of an actual audit, a solitary mistake, you can chalk that up to human error. But spotting two massive chronological lies bleeding across the exact same official document, both miraculously tilting in the exact same self-serving direction, both expertly woven to fake a meteoric rise and a hero's longevity that the cold, hard evidence simply rips apart, that is not an accident, that is a calculated deception. We are talking about twin lies that dramatically pump up a resume, stretching across 44 years of an incredibly public law enforcement career. You do not just oops your way into a pristine record like that. Honest mistakes are chaotic and messy. They never magically trend perfectly toward making you look like an absolute legend. Keep this chilling detail locked in your mind. The ugly truth did not see the light of day because some noble insider caught the cover-up and blew the whistle. The entire charade came crashing down only when a relentless investigative reporter at the Arizona Republic dug through the dirt and cornered Nanos about his shady El Paso history. These were not wild rumors or venomous smears, just the raw, undeniable paperwork begging for a simple answer. So, what did the sheriff write back? His exact, chilling response. So, that is your big, urgent emergency. Are you absolutely positive you do not want to dig into my high school days and ask why the principal took a paddle to me? Best of luck with your pathetic little smear job. Let that horrifying reality sink in. The highest-ranking lawman in Pima County, pinned down by a fabricated official record, offered zero transparency. He gave zero admission of guilt, and absolutely refused to peel back the curtain on how his fabricated timeline drifted so far from reality. Instead, he practically spat on the inquiry, waving away the media with a sickening display of pure arrogance. Branding rock-solid, fact-based reporting as a malicious attack. Combine that with a deeply disturbing moment from his February 3rd press briefing, where he was cornered over a totally false public statement he had just delivered. He brazenly brushed it off, claiming he usually speaks in broad strokes, adding that he just is not accustomed to people hanging onto his every syllable and demanding he answer for them. At least he was terrifyingly honest about one thing: the man is completely unaccustomed to facing the music for his own reckless behavior. He stood right there at the podium, caught dead to rights on camera in the middle of a live, pulse-pounding, hostage hunt, whining to the press because they dared to confront a massive error he was forced to swallow. We are not even going to add our own spin to those jaw-dropping confessions. The sheer audacity speaks completely for itself. Both remarks are permanently burned into the public record. Hearing it straight from the horse's mouth is enough to make your blood run cold. What you are about to hear next does not come from the peanut gallery. This is not some armchair detective work, nor is it the bitter complaining of political rivals out for blood, or random internet sleuths doom-scrolling through the mystery from their couches. These are the raw, unfiltered testimonies of insiders, the heavy hitters who walked those halls and bled for that very institution. These are the hardened veterans who ground it out under his command for years and gambled their entire livelihoods and personal safety to drag this dark reality into the light. 4 key players, each one about to be fully unmasked, because when the stakes are life and death, the gravity of the witness is the only thing that matters. Enter Aaron Cross, a battle-tested sergeant deeply embedded in the Pima County Sheriff's Office. He did not just pack up and walk away. This is no washed-up retiree tossing grenades from the safety of the sidelines with absolutely nothing to lose. He is actively wearing the badge, clocking in under this very sheriff, grinding through the nightmare of this exact investigation, while also reigning as the fiercely loyal president of the local deputies union. He is the chosen shield for the everyday officers, elected by the brave men and women on the street to champion their survival. When he talks, you are hearing the collective heartbeat of the boots on the ground, the ones drowning in the trenches of this case who witness its terrifying reality day in and day out. And the statement he leaked to the New York Post will send shivers straight down your spine. He declared that an overwhelming shadow hangs over the precinct, with everyone firmly believing this harrowing ordeal has morphed into nothing more than a sick ego trip for Sheriff Nanos. Just let that absolute bombshell settle in your bones for a second. This is no rival candidate spinning lies, nor a click-hungry reporter or some casual bystander. This is the top dog of the deputies union, handpicked by the very officers of Pima County to be their ultimate defender. He stared directly at a grueling 41-day hostage nightmare involving an incredibly vulnerable 84-year-old grandmother and branded it a narcissistic power play. Cross went completely on the offensive, boldly stating that the federal heavyweights at the FBI should have hijacked this botched operation within the crucial first few days, rather than letting Pima County hoard the power under Chris Nanos, and he permanently stamped his own name right on that lethal accusation. Then there is Richard Carmona, a titan who certainly did not watch this circus unfold from the cheap seats. He was deep in the trenches, bleeding for the badge, long before he became a household name across the nation. Carmona cut his teeth in Pima County as a fierce deputy, a gritty detective, a tactical SWAT commander, and the precinct's very own trauma doctor. His knowledge of this squad's dark history does not come from a textbook. It was forged in fire through years of grueling survival across every dangerous level of the force. He has looked the beast of authority right in the eyes, watching commanders rise and fall through decades of shifting regimes. He knows exactly what an elite, well-oiled law enforcement machine looks like, and he smells the rot when it falls apart. Carmona eventually skyrocketed to become the 17th Surgeon General. Handpicked by the President of the United States, we are talking about a title carrying such immense, life-altering power that the entire Senate had to sign off on his command. When it comes to raw credentials and unshakable authority, he is arguably the most untouchable legend to ever walk those precinct floors, stepping right in front of the Fox 10 Phoenix broadcast lenses. He dropped an absolute bombshell. Quote, "We are frankly let down by the sheer absence of guidance from the top brass. And certain comments made are just profoundly humiliating." Let down, humiliating. We are talking about the former top medical official of the entire nation, a man who previously wore the badge for this very agency as a patrol officer and plainclothes investigator. And this tactical unit commander stared directly at a live abduction manhunt and deliberately selected those exact descriptors. He did not offer the standard police speak about monitoring the crisis, but instead branded it a humiliating failure, attaching his entire reputation to that broadcast, tossing a match right into the center of an operation that was unfolding in real time. Carmona could have easily stayed silent. Instead, he willingly stepped into the crosshairs, ensuring the term humiliating became his official verdict on the very agency he used to bleed for. Then you have Bob Cryer, a man who dedicated close to 30 years of his life to the Pima County Sheriff's Department. He wore the lieutenant bars. He ran the elite tactical operations. We are talking about breathless, pulse-pounding scenarios where a single bad call does not just earn a stern warning. It results in irreversible human tragedies. This is a guy who intimately understands how real commanders navigate the terrifying chaos of an emergency, and he is acutely aware of the chilling void left when that command is completely absent. Speaking on the Surviving the Survivor audio show around the beginning of March 2026, Cryer dropped a staggering revelation: the rank and file had executed a strict vote of no confidence against Sheriff Nanos, revealing an unbelievable 98% mutiny rate. Naturally, the top brass pushed back hard against those numbers, drawing a line in the sand. They claimed merely a single union out of 5 took part, with less than 50% of those eligible even casting a ballot. In the eyes of the administration, a 98% rebellion from a tiny sliver of the roster hardly speaks for the entire force. We are laying all the cards on the table here, entirely for transparency. Cryer shared the grim statistics exactly as they were presented to him. The agency immediately cried foul on the calculations, leaving it completely up to you to weigh the truth. But here is the chilling reality nobody can argue with: a 30-year hardened veteran who orchestrated high-risk entry raids, a decorated supervisor who knows where all the secrets are buried inside this precinct, stared dead at this mishandled manhunt and officially declared the man in charge utterly unfit for duty. Mathematics aside, the sheer hostility behind that gesture is crystal clear. Enter Heather Lappin, who held a prominent supervisory rank within those same walls for roughly 19 long years. She was no rookie passing through, and certainly no armchair quarterback looking in. That is almost 2 decades entrenched in the trenches, surviving different sheriffs and weathering countless harrowing cases throughout a massive career in justice. She took her voice straight to The Hollywood Reporter and branded Chris Nanos with a single, devastating label: a dictator. She even compared him to a mob boss, pulling no punches with generic workplace complaints, but instead launching highly targeted, explosive accusations. Dictator, mobster, dropped onto the public record under her own identity, right in the thick of a critical operation handled by the very agency she gave her life to, a seasoned shield-bearer who fully understood the catastrophic professional destruction those labels could trigger, yet fearlessly broadcasted them anyway. Lappin did not stop there. She unleashed a formal notice of claim, aimed straight at the heart of the department, launching the mandatory first strike of a major civil battle over the severe backlash she faced for breaking the silence. The paperwork screams vicious payback, demanding a staggering $2 million in damages. But the massive payout itself is not the focus here. It serves as grim context, showing the incredible personal ruin she expected to face for opening her mouth. And yet, she refused to be gagged. A true veteran with 20 years of grit chose to trigger a multi-million-dollar legal war rather than turn a blind eye to the darkness brewing behind closed doors. That is the sheer gravity of her warning. Now, prepare yourself for one final, jaw-dropping detail to close this chapter, laid out plainly for your judgment. The disappearance of Nancy Guthrie reminds us that behind every headline is a real human life. An 84-year-old grandmother vanished from the safety of her own home, leaving a family, a community, and an entire nation searching for answers. Cases like this are not only about solving a mystery, they are about responsibility, compassion, and the power of collective vigilance. One of the most powerful lessons from this story is the importance of accountability in leadership. When lives are at stake, every decision matters. Transparency, professionalism, and careful communication are not optional, they are essential. A single mistake or careless disclosure can change the course of an investigation and potentially endanger the very person authorities are trying to protect. But this story also highlights something hopeful: the strength of community. Families, journalists, investigators, and everyday citizens all play a role in seeking truth and justice. When people speak up, ask questions, and demand integrity from those in power, they help protect the values that keep society safe. Most importantly, we should never allow a missing person to become just another statistic. Nancy Guthrie is not merely a case file, she is a mother, a grandmother, and a human being who deserves to be found. Stories like this remind us that empathy, vigilance, and accountability are not just ideals, they are responsibilities we all share.